We are welcoming back Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch. She is the owner of Lincoln-Goldfinch Law in Austin, Texas. She is an immigration lawyer and specialist. And we asked her today to talk about this deportation effort that seems to be one of the campaign promises that Donald Trump is most proud of. Kate, how are you today?
Hi, I'm good. I'm happy to be here with you.
Happy to have you back again. There have been some reports that if Trump wins again and is able to implement his program, that there would be something like 11 million to 13 million deportations. Is that what you're seeing and reading and expecting?
Well, I think that he would attempt to achieve that number. I mean, there's the total number of undocumented people in the country is unknown, but the minimum is probably 11 million. And what he stated is that he would use the Alien Invasion Act, which is a very old law from the late 1700s, to give him presidential authority to just round up and detain and deport people without due process, without the right to a hearing or seeing a lawyer, seeing a judge, or appealing. And, you know, probably he could get pretty far down that pathway if he were to implement it before a federal court were to step in. So I think we would see mass deportations and separations of families under this plan of Trump's.
What did you say that old law was that he could use? What's the name of it?
So it's called the Alien Invasion Act. It's from 1798, and the theory of the act back then was that a president could, in a wartime situation, detain, deport, handle the enemy combatants from a nation with which we were at war. It was last used during Japanese internment and hasn't been used since, nor has it been revoked as a law. And Trump has said that he would intend to use this particular law, which of course is problematic because we aren't at war with the nations from which we have migrants. We aren't at war with Cuba, with Venezuela, with Haiti, with Nicaragua, with Mexico. So there's a major flaw in the premise of the president's ability to use this act. But again, the way these things function, as we saw during the first Trump administration, is he goes full bore into the implementation of a policy, and consequences come later, weeks or months down the line. And in that period of time, thousands of families would be impacted, not to mention the families that aren't impacted, the people who employ immigrants or know them or love them, or the friends of the children. I mean, communities are absolutely impacted, as is the economy with something like this.
Well, that was what he did before. It was sort of like put it in place. And for the people who say it's illegal, you can go to courts, and work its way through the courts. And honestly, Kate, with this seemingly rubber stamp U.S. Supreme Court that we've got now, even if a challenge to the Alien Invasion Act ended up before the Supreme Court, I'm not confident that they would rule against Donald Trump. Are you?
No, I've lost confidence in the federal courts. I mean, there's been so much forum shopping, but we've seen a lot of, in immigration specifically, a lot of cases brought to the federal court system that have been decided in zany ways, and so I think it's not secure that the courts would step in and block this. I think probably what we would see is a public outcry, even though public sentiment has really turned anti-immigrant in the last 8 years. I mean, I think we all recall during the family separations at the border just how shocked and upset all of us were when we knew that little children were being taken from their parents. Well, this would be exactly that, but in the interior of the United States. So in some ways, even more abhorrent, because these are U.S. citizen children, many of them, whose parents are being ripped away from them. So it's like it's a step even more into the unbelievable. So I imagine that the minute that starts occurring and there's media coverage of it and footage and photos, people become, in an absolute uproar is what that would likely look like. I would hope, actually. And then the courts probably would follow suit, but nothing is a guarantee.
I can't believe we're back in this position again, worrying about incredible, possibly or probably illegal things that Donald Trump would do against immigrants in this country. But, when your whole campaign is based on hate, you've got to have somebody to hate, and what better person than these immigrants, because they're not like us, Kate. That's the whole, that's the whole thing about how you get regular people to support really hateful ideas. And I know that you have the statistics about the value that immigrants bring to this country. I mean, we've heard legislators in California say, hey, we cut off the flow of immigrants. You're not going to get your fresh produce because there's not going to be anybody out there picking it. I mean, what do you think that these people are doing? They're not taking your CEO jobs. They're not becoming middle managers and shoving you to the side. Generally, people who are new to this country, legal or illegal, papered or not papered, they start off at the lowest level jobs, the jobs that it's always argued that very few other people want to do. Is there any way other than simply making sure Donald Trump never gets back to the White House that we can prevent this kind of nonsense from happening again? Can we get like the Comstock Act and the Alien Invasion Act off the books once and for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably an uphill climb. I think that's unlikely. I mean, I think us regular folk, who are out here doing what we can do about the election and all of that, and we're on social media. I mean, the thing that we need to do is balance this conversation. The public sentiment in the last 8 years has shifted so drastically about immigration that even sort of moderate thinking people are starting to wonder or believe this rhetoric around anti-immigration. And it's simply not based in reality. This is because the Trump supporters, Trump-like politicians have been so loud and constant in this drumbeat of immigration. And conversely, the Biden administration, in a day that they're not talking about immigration is a good day for them. So they would rather the conversation just not occur. But that vacuum of conversation has created way more noise on the anti-immigrant side. And so what I think needs to occur more than anything is those of us who are thoughtful and believe that there's probably something that's not true about all this anti-immigrant rhetoric. We need to do the job of talking about it, learning about it, posting on social media about it, not being afraid of the conversation, because we've got to balance out this conversation. I mean, it's just been too quiet over here on the other side. And of course, we know that, immigrants built this country and that we've had periods like this in the past where Irish Catholics and Italians and Jewish people and Asian people have all been vilified and treated as if they're stealing jobs. And we're just in another phase of that. And we can recognize it, but we've got to start talking about it.
Yeah. Where's a good place to start? Who should be, obviously you're speaking out on this. We'd like to see perhaps elected officials speaking out on this. What can regular people do, Kate?
Well, I think listening, not changing the dial, giving support to the people who are saying, the positive immigration stuff. There was a podcast, I think it was yesterday's podcast on the New York Times Daily about immigration history and just sort of opening to the information about it, looking for sharing it on social media. And those are the things that I think just really start to move the needle bit by bit. And my sense is that people don't want to touch this because it's big, it's complicated. Nobody feels like they know the answer, and so they just rather not say anything because they don't want to say the wrong thing. Mm-hmm. But that lack of saying anything, the silence, has allowed what has occurred to happen. And so just sharing the article that resonates with you, saying something pro-immigrant and not being afraid to do it, appreciating the restaurant that you go to, the things all around you that are the melting pot and the diversity of this country is like paying attention, remembering, and talking about it. We've got to all do that.
It's kind of hard, especially when you have friends or colleagues or family members who never seem to turn the channel away from Fox, because Fox Cable has been a big purveyor of a lot of this information and misinformation. And, I've heard people who otherwise should know better just echo things like, well, there are a lot of political types who want, undocumented people to get medical care. Okay, well, let's think that through. Let's say a family comes in and they haven't filed the paperwork or they haven't filed it yet, so they are undocumented, and their son falls off a bicycle and breaks his arm. Should that kid have to live life with the broken arm that heals however it can because he can't go to a doctor or can't go to an ER? I mean, if people just think through these, we don't want to pay for the health care of undocumented. Okay, well, let's just let those kids who get sick with infections die then, shall we? I mean, most people don't want that, but they don't think it through.
Also, the big thing, too, that's underlying all of this is that immigrants are not a net drain on resources. Immigrants pay taxes, they pay employment taxes, they pay sales taxes, they pay property taxes. That one immigrant in one job actually creates more than one job. That's what the studies have shown. And that's because they're, industrious and they grow economy and they're entrepreneurial more than U.S. citizens are. So immigrants being here and receiving medical care doesn't mean that some U.S. citizens then isn't receiving that same medical care. It's not a zero-sum game when an immigrant benefits somehow in our society. So I think also just removing that premise that, one immigrant in a U.S. job means that some U.S. worker is out of a job. That's not how this functions. It's not that simple. An immigrant here receiving medical care means, their parents are working and maybe their mom's cleaning the hospital. Or maybe their dad's a nurse. It's like we need to just stop thinking that an immigrant taking means they're not also giving elsewhere.
Yes, and that any service provided to an immigrant somehow is a service taken away from me. That seems to be the equation, or that somehow it's going to be my tax dollars carrying these people. But again, I think you're absolutely right. And I think while it's difficult to have those conversations, especially with people you love, that it is absolutely our responsibility to do just that. And do everything possible to make sure that Donald Trump never is in a position to put horrible people as heads of agencies ever again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot is on the line. We all know that. I think everybody's just collectively holding their breath right now.
Yes. Every morning I wake up and I put I have to go to the shower because my hair is on fire and I have to put it out. That's kind of how it feels. I've had a stomach ache for a week and a half now, Kate. I can't wait to get this election behind us.
I know, and I keep finding myself like I'll be in a conversation and everything will be normal, and then I'll remember. Do you find yourself like looping back to remembering what's happening? And then it's like, oh, this realization. Oh yeah, and nobody
well, let's
knows.
hope that our next conversation, you and me, is going to be delving into the pros and cons of the latest immigration policy that the Kamala Harris White House is putting out, and what's good in it and what could be better. What do you say? Let's look forward to that day.
I'm very much looking forward to that conversation.
Kate, Lincoln-Goldfinch is a Texas immigration attorney. Her firm is based in Austin, Texas, Lincoln-Goldfinch Law. Kate, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You are a voice of reason, where in an area where I find those sometimes hard to find.
You and me both.
Thanks so much for your time.